From WOKR, Rochester, this is News Source 13 at 11.
Good morning, everyone. At 18 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock, it's time for the Channel 13 Sign-On News.
He brought Rochester the news for more than a quarter century here on Channel 13. Tonight, we remember the life of our friend, colleague, and local broadcast legend, Dick Burt.
But it was a lot of fun.
Good evening, I'm Jenny Ryan. Don will join us in a moment. We have tonight a story that hits very close to home to all of us at Channel 13. Dick Burt, a news anchor here at Channel 13 for 25 years, passed away today. The news came tonight to his good friend and colleague, Don Elhart. Don is away for his son's college graduation, but he shared his remembrances of Dick tonight with a phone call to Doug, and not an easy one for all of us here.
This is a story I wish I did not have to do, but with help from Don, long distance tonight, we can tell the story of a mentor, a friend, and a wonderfully funny man. Dick Burt died today on Cape Cod, where he was visiting one of his 4 children. He had just cut the grass, took a nap, and died in his sleep at the age of 75.
Channel 13 presents Dick Burt.
Dick Burt was a WOKR original, anchoring the first newscasts on a $35 cardboard set. He was an educated and dignified man who loved broadcast journalism, and he knew Rochester, his hometown, so very well. One lasting memory for viewers in the early days of Channel 13 was Dick getting man-on-the-street reaction to the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
We've talked to many people here on Clinton Avenue throughout the afternoon and evening hours. The comment of stunned disbelief at first that such a thing could happen in 1963.
Dick Burt, Don Elhart, co-anchormen for Channel 13's Eyewitness News.
He would spend 25 years behind the anchor desk at Channel 13, most of them with Don.
Probably most often I remember the fun times, as we do with all of our colleagues, and the times when we laughed on the air and sometimes perhaps couldn't control it. And I think probably the other thing is that in the area of being a mentor. The principles of journalism that Dick Burt stood for are principles that News Source 13 continues to uphold today.
Those of us who worked with him will remember Dick Burt as one of the funniest characters you could ever meet. He would remind us in mock conceit that he was a very important man, but he always had time for a game of golf, especially if he could play at a discount. Dick's frugality was legendary.
And the Dick Burt we all knew and loved was the Dick Burt who went into Wegmans and cried discrimination, said that it was not fair that only children should have the cookie card and get a free cookie, and that he was entitled to that, and to this day is probably the only senior citizen who was a card-carrying member of Wegmans Cookie Club wherever he went.
I visited with Dick just last month to talk about the old days as we began broadcasting from the new set at Channel 13. What we wouldn't give for one more phone conversation, one more game of golf, one more hour with our friend.
Wasn't much money back in those days, but it was a lot of fun.
He did have fun. And that conversation I had with Don tonight went on for quite a while, and I wish I could have shared it all. Don held it together for part of it and not for all of it. They were close for so long.
Yeah.
And one thing Don said was kind of what I touched on there at the end, that he was going to call Dick for lunch and he was going to call Dick for golf.
Right, what we all do in our lives.
They saw a lot of each other.
Yeah.
I had a connection to Dick. I certainly didn't have like Don did, but my dad and Dick Burt went to high school, Charlotte High together. And Dick was a year ahead of my father at Charlotte High, class of 43. And I found this tonight. I went out to my mom and dad's house, sent someone out, and we got this yearbook, and I think
the old photo.
There is Dick Burt's senior high class photo, Charlotte, and I read his quote as we leave this picture up. "Bid me discourse, I will enchant thine ear," which kind of makes sense when you think about what he went on to do. He worked in radio in the area south of Buffalo at Fredonia for a while, and Dunkirk, I know, and came to Channel 13 as a salesman and anchorman in 1962. and was here for 25 years.
A local broadcasting legend.
Yeah, we're going to share some funny stuff later on, too.
That helped.
Boy, there was so much of that, but arrangements are pending as far as Dick's funeral services. They'll probably happen sometime
We will certainly pass it along to everyone, and we'll have a lot more from Don next week. We share now a statement from WOKR-TV General Manager Ken Beckwith. Ken saying tonight, Dick was my friend and colleague for over 36 years. WOKR's prominence in Rochester news owes a great deal to Dick's years as anchor and news director. I knew him to be as kind and caring as he was talented and professional. He generously shared his intellect and wit, his smile and charm, his enormous capacity to enjoy life. We will miss him dearly. This is the time we typically share our T-shirts of the week, but we are breaking with that routine to remember longtime WOKR anchor Dick Burt, as we shared with you earlier. He passed away today at his son's home in Cape Cod. Don would have been here tonight, but he's celebrating his son's college graduation, but he spoke tonight on phone to share some remembrances.
Yeah, he really did. Dick was 75 years old, but you know, his dad lived to 90-something, and I think we all kind of thought Dick was going to do the same. But I talked to Don from Ithaca tonight, and one of the things he wanted to share was the way he's feeling tonight about the regrets you have whenever somebody dies, and here's what Don had to say.
So many things, as often happens when someone passes so suddenly. The golf game that you were going to ask him to play, the lunch you were going to schedule in the very near future, all the things you thought you had time to do are not now available. And it only reinforces, I think, for all of us, the value of true friendships and the challenge for all of us to live those every day and never take them for granted.
It was almost, trying to think, it was almost 30 years ago. I came in here for a tour at Channel 13 with my dad and mom, and Dick Burt gave it to me. And I remember going by Don Elhart's desk, and there was a picture of Dick on his bulletin board with the big caption, "My Hero," under it. And that was the kind of relationship they had. It was a lot of fun, and no one, as you've seen in the videotape and from knowing Dick over the years, no one could get you giggling quite the way Dick
And I
could.
think that's making things easier for Don tonight, remembering the good times and the funny times, and we have some of those right now.
Dick, whenever he was about to laugh, would grab his glasses. I don't know if you'll see that in here or not, but...
England's royal family seems to be having its hard luck these days. Of course, you know about the kidnap attempt of Princess Anne. Well, now her father, Prince, is also having his troubles, Prince Philip. It seems that you won't believe it.
I'm waiting.
Well, today he decided to go for a ride around Windsor Castle. So he got out a pair of horses, a team of horses, and a coach, and off he went. In fact, that's just what happened. He went off. The horses shied. And
George, do you want to finish it up?
It's 12:30. Well, tell us what happened anyway. We got to get the end of this down. The horses shied.
Yes,
and he fell off.
He fell off, and the horses kicked him.
Hilarious.
Oh, dear.
Well, election 74 may be history now, but in the campaign over, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the traditional yakety-yak has been... I knew we were going to have problems. Have we run out of time?
Time to go. Say goodnight, Dick.
Good night, Dick.
Finally.
Sorry about that. I thought we wanted... Go ahead. After 25 years, you'd think we'd be a little smoother.
The local police soon found out you can't catch a moose with a noose. And if you get too close, you could be in for some abuse. The moose is headed northward again in his Adirondack caboose. Little trailer there.
Hey, moose with a lot of juice there. Let's take one more look at the weather.
Okay, in the morning we will see some sunshine. The temperature's around 55.
Good night.
Good evening, I'm Brian Washington. Norma Holland has the night off. We begin tonight with some memories of a man who broadcast the news on this television station for a quarter of a century. Dick Burt died yesterday. He was 75 years old. News Source 13's Doug Embledge worked with Dick Burt and spoke with others today who remember him well.
Curfew is in effect and will be in effect.
Dick Burt joined WOKR as a salesman in 1962, but moved to news a year later with an agreement that if things didn't work out, he could return to the sales department.
He decided to go to news because none of us could earn a living, and he had a family to support and thought he could do a better job earning a living in news.
Things did work out. Dick anchored the news at Channel 13 for 25 years. And hired the man who would work at his side for 20 of those years.
Dick was always a little more the journalist. I was always a little more the show producer. And we would sometimes kid each other about that because he would not always understand what I was trying to do in terms of how we put a show together. And I might not always understand his sense of urgency in terms of the content. But together, we found that ability to do something that seemed to work for our audience.
This is the Dick Burt viewers knew, the newsman. He was on the street for Rochester's reaction to the JFK assassination. He was at the lakeshore to cover the fury of Hurricane Agnes, and he was host for countless Channel 13 special programs that reinforced his commitment to his hometown. This is the desk where Dick Burt turned out so many stories for Channel 13 over the years, first on a manual typewriter, then on an electric one. He retired before we got computers. Dick was a serious newsman, but he was also a very funny man. And the humor was always dry, as Bill Peterson found out during his first night on the air here.
My first night on the air, I worked with Dick Burt. And Dick turns to me and says, hey, I'd like to introduce our new meteorologist now, Ken Patterson. And I said, no, Dick. I said, it's close, but not quite. And it kind of started, I think, my whole career on being very loose on the air and being very friendly.
And Dick would pretend to be pompous. You'd call him to play golf and he'd tell you he was much too busy and important for that, then ask where we were playing and could he get the senior citizen discount. Oh yes, Dick Burt played his frugality to the hilt.
It was time for the wedding cake. And Dick got a piece of wedding cake, which he thought was a little on the small side. So Dick puts the cake on his leg under the table, and when the waitress comes back, says, ma'am, I didn't get my cake yet. Gave him another piece of cake. So he got 2 pieces of cake, and then he felt satisfied.
I think all of us that know Dick know how he enjoyed life in his golf, and he played with a lot of his old cronies, and he went to the library, and he did the brown bag lunches at the library with reviewing books, and he kept himself very busy, and he let you know how busy he was, too. Whenever you called, he says, well, I don't know if I can work you in, but I'll try.
Dick Burt died in his sleep yesterday while visiting one of his sons on Cape Cod. He leaves his wife, Sissy, 2 sons, 2 daughters, and grandchildren. And he leaves a second WOKR family who loved him dearly. Doug Embledge, News Source 13.
Oh, say goodnight, Dick. Good night, Dick.
Don Alhart is out of town this weekend. He will be sharing his memories of Dick Burt when he returns to work next week. We spoke with Rochester's mayor today. He said he is saddened by the news of Dick Burt's death.
Dick Burt was really an icon in this community, a man whose image was on the screens of television for more than 20 years. And I know that his contributions have been greatly appreciated, and I think he'll be long remembered for what he did, not only for Channel 13, but for the greater community.
Funeral arrangements for Dick Burt are pending.
For a community-wide movement.
Wrap it up. Quick good night.
Evening Veterans Program.
And come back to 3.
Federal
On 3. 3 minutes from 5. We won't use the chat. Give them a bye-bye.
Edition of Eyewitness News.
Bye-bye.
News at 11.
And dissolve. Cut their mics. Stream up. Step out of roll 1. Roll 1, master.
I had to get into the line of work. Ooh, that we had to squeeze a little.
The role of the anchorman, of course, is to tie the newscast together, to give the viewer an identifiable figure to make it easier for them to follow the whole newscast.
As we've talked to many people here on Clinton Avenue throughout the afternoon and evening hours. A comment of stunned disbelief at first that such a thing could happen in 1963.
When we started out 20 years ago, I'd rush downtown. Well, our studios were on Clinton Avenue North. I'd go down and I'd get the 10 o'clock edition of the Democrat and Chronicle. There were editions coming out at that time. This is what was the 11 o'clock news, a rewrite of the newspaper. Now, we've come a long way since then, since the early days of television.
Good evening. I've come to see Dick Burt. Thank you.
Dick Burt, come to lobby.
My wife's name is Margaret Mary, but a lot of people call her Sissy. You brought your money, I trust.
Oh, dear. Am I spending the grocery money again?
I only have $1.
$1. $1 big dollar. Even McDonald's will take it for $1. He's a perfectly delightful person to live with. He has a very even disposition. He's always angry. No, he's never angry. He's just never angry.
I get oh, that's my role over there. She's got my role. But we'll speak. I believe that film will be with us shortly. No, apparently we've lost that film. Very, very good. The fish is delicious. Yeah. It really is. I'm
You look
delighted.
wonderful on TV, you know that? You
Well,
really do.
I'm much younger in person. A lot of people are confused because they see me in person and they think, well, you're so much younger and better looking. Frankly, it's rather a delight to be recognized on the street, and it's happened to me all over the world. All over the world, literally, people have walked up and Rochesterians traveled. And it is kind of fun. It's kind of pleasant. I'm one of the few people that I know that has a listed telephone, and I have not been bothered by, crank phone calls.
Until we go off the air.
Until you go off the air, and then they're going to look right up at the phone call. Damn, I hope I've got him on camera saying that. 80% of what you get out of a newscast, you're getting through your eyes, what you see. What we're telling you is just additional information for the most part, except for what we call desk stories. And of course, that is information given by the anchorman without visual amplification. We didn't get video of that giant pumpkin, did we? The big pumpkin?
No, we don't have.
Fog.
Did you ever have the dream of a bigger city network job?
No, I really haven't. I can say in all honesty, because I've had, from time to time in the past, not in the recent past, but in bygone days, inquiries from many larger stations in larger cities. And I can honestly say when it got right down, it was flattering. I love to get these calls from Toronto or Indianapolis or wherever. It's nice to get them, and then I had to stop and say, well, do I really want to go there? And the answer was always no. Not that I didn't probably want more money, but I just didn't want to leave this town and go to another city that didn't hold the appeal that Rochester has for me. Well, all right, Wendy, if you want to lay it on me, what do you got? There are days when you're searching for something really good to handle. And those are hard days, really hard days, when your lead stories are so weak and you're trying to figure out something that will command the attention of the audience. Those are difficult times. And yet the opposite happens. You've got a good, solid story, something important, you're putting all your effort into, and at the same time another story and a third story. It can be overwhelming at times, the good stories that break one on top of the other, and you're trying to manipulate your manpower and get your stories covered. The good times are when you're busy. Barry, would you like a Coke? I'd like a Coke.
Sure, Dick.
I got a dime. If you got 15 cents.
Again, Dick?
Harry, I don't have a dime. I'll tell you what, you get a Coke and we'll split it, though.
All right, Dick.
You pretend to have a somewhat frugal nature.
Probably won't see him again all night. Who's telling these canards again? Joel, that's...
Dick, I've known you for nearly 14 years.
Could I borrow it? I don't want to get the reputation of being parsimonious. I like to think of it anyway. I'm basically a very generous person that I share with everyone. And I expect them to share with me.
You got your dime?
Harry, first thing in the morning.
Sure, Dick.
First thing in the morning. Didn't you bring a cup for yourself?
No, I'm going to take the can.
Well, then... Oh, I thought maybe... Oh, okay, Harry.
How much of yourself can you let the public see, or do you let the public see?
It's funny thing about television, I think people really get a pretty good idea of the personality and character of an individual on the basis of what they see on television. It truly reveals the individual. Or at least you have the feeling that you really know what they're like. And I don't think you can be artificial or phony on television.
Those famous Burt dimples, is there a secret?
Dear, he's just going to kill me, Joel, if I say this, but I really must. He does sleep like this to keep his dimples in at night.
You mean with his fingers in?
Yes, he does, and I dare not disturb him because that's what keeps the dimples right.
Now, people are going to believe that, you know.
I know.
We'll be out to camera 3, both their mics, then camera 1 key.
I will probably do it as long as they feel I'm some value to the station, some value in holding an audience to Channel 13.
Here we go. Open both their mics. Dissolve for 3. Cue them.
Good evening, everyone. Coming up tonight, the FDA cracks down on tamper-proof products as poisonings continue.
And getting ready for something you...
Well, finally tonight I was out of town this past Friday when our newsroom heard of the passing of former news anchor and our friend Dick Burt. Tonight, my thoughts on a bright spot in my life. The Cornell campus in Ithaca reminded me of Dick as I gazed across the valley to Ithaca College, preparing for my son's graduation. How Dick loved academia, an Ivy League dreamer in the real world of television news. From his World War II days in the Navy, Dick would attend his beloved Denison University and the University of Vermont, where he received a master's in education. As I watched college professors in full commencement garb this weekend, I thought of Dick, my professor and teacher. No wonder in retirement he adopted the title Anchorman Emeritus. My professor, over more than 2 decades, sometimes father and son, sometimes brothers, always friends, even if not always in sync.
Finally. Sorry about that. Well, I thought we were going to... Go ahead. After 25 years, you'd think we'd be a little smoother.
Right. Dick was family. He was at my wedding 31 years ago and my oldest son's wedding this past fall. His family always important. I remember daily calls to his children to touch their lives when the night shift prevented him from being at home. Wife Sissy would visit him at work, sometimes for dinner, and Dick always the frugal one.
You dropped your money, I trust.
Oh, dear, my spending negotiating again.
I only have $1.
Family placed me elsewhere when we learned of Dick's passing. As we watched our youngest son, John, graduate and begin a broadcasting career, I remember lessons he received from Dick years ago on the fine art of throwing a horseshoe. As I watched that little boy, now a man, receive his degree, Dick was never far from mine. I saw him in the faces of professors. I thought of him as balloons were sent skyward in celebration of life. We benefit in life when we can learn from another. The world benefits when we can pass that knowledge on to others. I remember a journalist, a professor, but most of all, a friend. And I can't say it any better than Dick did over a decade ago.
We have been the very best of friends. There isn't a better friendship in all of broadcasting.